So shortly after I had a conversion in high school, and I think one of the first kind of miraculous events happened in my life. I was a sophomore in high school, and my older brother and I, were able to go on a vacation with another family. That had never happened before. We stayed with our family, but his best friend had a younger sibling my age. So they were their same age, the two of them, and then their parents. They took us to Mexico, which is super cool. It was so generous of them to take us on this trip. And at one point, they rented two cars. The parents did. They rented a small car for the two of them and a small car for the four of us. I think they wanted to save their sanity. And so, halfway through the vacation, which was super, again, it was so cool. It was so generous of this family. We were going to go on a little adventure, the four of us. And we got to this dive shop, and we are going to go scuba diving. And we got there, and it was closed for a siesta. So we're like, okay, well, it opens in an hour. Let's just explore. And so what we did is we just basically ran up and down the beach for a mile. We went, and we were running in and out of the water, diving. We're all four of us were on the swim team. And so we'd all, just do that. And it took us an hour, mile down, mile back, in and out of the ocean. We get back to the surf shop, the scuba shop. And my brother's best friend couldn't find the key to the rental car. And he was freaking out because he was like, my dad is going to kill me. Literally, my parents are going to lose it. I lost the key to the rental car. And I remember I'd been over at their house a couple times, and I'm like, yep, I think you're right. I've seen your dad get mad at you, and you're right. If you're not going to get killed, you're going to get maimed. And it was we had this desperation of let's look for the key. But how can you look for the key in a mile-long stretch of beach running in and out of the water? So I just prayed. I was praying to St. Anthony, obviously, right? We do that kind of thing. And I was just, okay, St. Anthony. I was just walking. I'm like, this is hopeless. It should have been St. Jude. This is hopeless. There's no way we possibly could find this key, but St. Anthony, please help us find this key. I don't want my brother's best friend to die on this vacation. We're doing the vacation. And I remember I said, in my prayer, I did some bargaining. Sometimes we do that, right? I said, St. Anthony, if you help me find this key, I will tell everybody I know about you helping me find this key. And honestly, I stopped where I was standing. I was praying. I stopped, looked down between my feet in the sand, and I couldn't even see. Just looked like something was dark underneath the surface of the sand. And I literally reached into the sand and pulled out the key. In this mile-long stretch of beach, in and out of the water, found the key. I was like, oh my gosh, you guys, we found this, St. Anthony. We go to the scuba shop, dive shop, and I told the lady working the desk, St. Anthony, help us out, because that was the thing. I was like, this is the first time I think I'd ever experienced what I would say is this miraculous divine intervention in my life. And you'd think man, that changed my life. But here's the thing, this is so remarkable. What I lived then was the same cycle that so many people live, that we see in the gospel today twice. And the cycle is this. We're in some kind of crisis, so we cry out to God in desperation. We are desperate, so we have desperate prayer. We're in desperate need, we cry out to God, He answers, and we're grateful, so grateful. And then we forget that it happened. This is probably every one of us in some degree, where we're in desperate need, we cry out to God, He answers us, we're grateful, so thankful to the Lord from our heart, and then we forget. And you might think are you kidding me? If God did a miracle in my life, I would never forget that. And you might be right. You also might be wrong. Because why? Because this is how we're built. We're leaky, right? We forget things so easily. And it's kind of you heard the joke about the person who's driving in their car in the parking lot, and they need to find a parking spot, and so they're praying, God, please help me find a parking spot. And do the bargaining like I did on the beach. God, if you help me find a parking spot, I promise I will go to church on Sundays. I'll stop drinking. I'll be a good person. And then they see an open spot and they're like, oh, never mind, God, I got one. I found it myself. We sometimes do this, right? We sometimes so easily just take away from God what was God's. Or even if we don't forget it, here's how we remember it. We remember it as if, that's some cool thing that once happened to me. Again, go back to this. Here's the cycle. I'm in desperate need. I cry out to God. God answers. I'm thankful. And if I don't forget it, it just becomes this really cool thing that once happened to me. And now become what happens to all of us. We become numb to the astounding. So here's a question. Could you witness a miracle and then go back to your life as if nothing happened? And I think we all could. I think we could bear witness to something astounding and then go back to our lives as if nothing happened. Because why? Because it just becomes a thing that happened, as normal as having legs that work. Which is kind of a miracle. As normal as having eyes that work. which is amazing. As normal as having seeing a sunrise, as normal as indoor plumbing. All of those things are astounding. And yet, they're just things we take for granted. Because that's our cycle, that's our tendency. This is the first reading. It's not the first reading, actually. In the first reading, something unique happens that puts a stop to this cycle. So the first reading, here's Naaman. Naaman's a Syrian. You don't know this necessarily, but Naaman was a great general in the Syrian army, and he has leprosy, which you probably know this. If you had leprosy in the ancient world, it was a death sentence. Like you are guaranteed to die from leprosy if you don't die from something before that. It was a death sentence. And so Naaman has a child slave who's Jewish. He captured her in a raid at one point, and she says, actually, there's a holy man in Israel who could actually heal you of your leprosy. And so Naaman travels all the way down to Israel, and here's Elisha. Elisha says, well, bathe yourself in the Jordan River 7 times. After a whole long rigmarole, Naaman does it. He has completely healed. So here's the story, right? He's in desperate need. He cries out to God, right? Goes to the man of God, Elisha. God answers. And he is so thankful. I don't know if he caught in the reading today. He's like, he says, I will give you riches. I'll give you all these gifts. I'll give you as many things as possible. Elisha says, nah, don't worry about it. You don't need to give me anything. God's the one who healed you. Here is where Naaman stops the cycle. Because Naaman says this, okay, I'm going to go back home. But he says, let me have at least 2 mule loads worth of earth. And then I want to highlight this. He stops the cycle by saying, okay, let me have 2 mule loads worth of earth. So that when I go back home, I'm taking land from where your God, where the God who healed me, that's where he is. Now, here's what Naaman didn't know. Naaman didn't know that God is the God of the whole universe. Here's what he did know. He knew this. He did not want to go back home and stay the same. That he was taking this mule loads of earth. Why? Because when he got back home, he was going to spread it out. And every time he stood on that earth, he is standing on the land of the God who saved his life. For the rest of Naaman's life, with those 2 mule loads of earth, he goes back home and he makes a choice to build his life on what God had done for him. He made a choice to build his life on the God who saved his life. And that's what breaks the cycle. So, in the gospel today, here's these 10 lepers. They're all healed. One comes back and thanks the Lord. Again, that's good, but I'm going to say this. If that 10th leper doesn't have his own 2 mule loads of earth, he is in danger of doing exactly what we all do, either forgetting or saying, oh yeah, that really cool thing that happened to me once. Because here's what we have to do. We have to realize what Jesus has done for us is what he's done for those lepers, right? Those lepers, those 10 men, they're as good as dead. Naaman, as good as dead. And us, in our sin, as good as dead. That's actually biblically an analogy. Leprosy is a biblical analogy for sin. Why? Because leprosy is fatal, so is sin. Leprosy is contagious, and so is sin. And God's grace steps in and saves us. And what happens? Cycle. I'm in desperate need. I cry out to God, please, Jesus, save me from my sin. He does it because he's so good. I'm thankful. And then what? Then what do I do? Unless I'm willing to do 2 things. Unless I'm willing to build my life on this, unless I'm willing to take my 2 mule loads worth of earth and say I'm going to build my life on the Jesus who saved my life, and then also unless I'm willing to talk about it and say it, I'll simply forget it. I remember listening to or reading a quote from Pope Benedict XVI years ago. It's one of those quotes that just sticks with you so many times that or so deeply that you say it all the time. And so Pope Benedict, at the beginning of one of his first encyclical, God is Love, he says this. He says on the first page, he says, being a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty ideal. What that means is, he says, being a Christian is not the result of, hey, this seems like the right way to believe, not an ethical choice, or a lofty ideal. This seems like a good way to live. He says, while we believe, Pope Benedict believed that Christianity is an good ethical choice and a lofty ideal, because being a Christian is not the result of that. He said, being a Christian is the result of an event. He said, it's the result of an encounter with a person that gives one's life a new horizon and sets it in a decisive direction. Being a Christian is the result of an encounter, a moment. Now, that moment could be a process, doesn't have to be a single moment. It could be a process but it's one that I met Jesus. And however it happened, whether it was a miracle or not a miracle, or just an encounter, that was a beautiful moment where I just knew that here is God and he is real and he is present and he is Jesus. That encounter gives one's life a new horizon and sets it in a decisive direction. I've talked to so many people who have had that encounter in adoration. They were at camp, they were at a retreat, they were somewhere, and they went into God's presence, Jesus' presence in the Eucharist. And I know that's you, God. I know that's you, Jesus. Or like me, my first encounter with Jesus in that way that changed my life and set it in a decisive direction was in confession. When I was 15 years old, going to the priest's house and just experiencing what God's forgiveness could do in my life. I left that house, stepped off his porch, and I can trace virtually every good choice in my life back to that moment. Because that moment set my life in a decisive direction. So adoration could be confession. Some people experience Christ for the first time in community. And it gives their life a new horizon, a decisive direction. I mentioned, I find so many people have this experience. They go away for a retreat, they go to a camp, they go to a conference, and they encounter Jesus in a real way. And then what happens? Well, you have this quote unquote retreat high, then you come back home to the real world. And what happens, it just fades away. Again, you guys, this is the cycle. And we sometimes think, oh no, that's just what happens. It's not what has to happen. It's what happens because we live in the cycle of we realize we're in desperate need, we cry out to God, he answers us because he loves us, we're thankful, and then we go back home and we didn't bring our 2 mule loads worth of earth. We go back home to our ordinary life that we left before, and there's no room for Jesus in that life. Our gratitude falters and our memory fades because what Jesus had done is meant to be used. The encounter is great. The encounter is necessary. But the encounter was meant to be the beginning of a relationship. Think about if you're someone who's married or engaged to be married. Think about, you probably remember your first date. Maybe you remember the first time you're like, oh wow, I'm in love with this person. That's amazing. That's the encounter. But you don't rely on that date. You don't rely on that moment to love them now. That encounter was what sparked the fact that you now have a relationship with them. God wants the same thing for us. That encounter is meant to spark our decision to take our 2 mule loads worth of earth and say, I'm going to build my life on the God who saved my life. I'm going to live out the relationship. Unless we do that, it'll fade. So how do we do that? I think a couple ways. I think one of the ways we do it as Catholics, we have little reminders. We have these things that we hold on to. I don't know if you remember the TV show Cheers. In the TV show Cheers, there was the main character, Sam Malone. And Sam Malone owned and ran a bar. He was a former professional baseball player, but his career tanked because he was an alcoholic, which doesn't make any sense that he's then owning and running a bar, but that's part of the story. At one point, I remember maybe the one episode of Cheers that I remember is the day that Sam lost a bottle cap. And the reason why it was so significant to him is he said that was the first night he didn't drink. He knew his life had hit rock bottom. And all he had was this bottle cap from a beer bottle. And he described that night, he said, that whole night I squeezed, I knew I couldn't drink. I would kill myself if I did. So I just squeezed that bottle cap, and he said there was nights where because it wasn't just that one night. Every night he wanted to drink, he would squeeze the bottle cap and it would form an impression in his hands. The point of this episode was that he lost the bottle cap. And a significant moment happened where either he or one of his friends opened a beer bottle, poured the beer out, handed him the new bottle cap and said, here you go. It was that thing that reminded him not just of that first night of sobriety, it reminded him of the fact that he wanted to be a man who was free. And we have these too, right? Imagine every time, if you wear a crucifix, if you wear a cross, every time you put that cross on, you're not just remembering, I remember what Jesus did for me 2,000 years ago. I remember when I first became a Christian, you're putting that cross over your neck or putting it on the wall. You're holding it in your hand and you're saying, this is what Jesus has done for me now. Like, this is our relationship, one of love. I have this ring, and I got this ring in Israel, and written on the ring are the words, you are a priest forever, which I actually had checked by an Israeli person who read Hebrew. I didn't want it to say made in Taiwan. He says, what it literally says is, you are an everlasting priest. And that's from Psalm 110. When I wear this ring, it's not like, oh yeah, June 6th, 2003. That's what I think of. When I put this ring on every morning, I don't think of June 6th, 2003, the day I got ordained. I think today, I want to live this relationship out. See, that's why we have these things. The encounter is important, but we need to have our 2 mule loads worth of earth. What is that thing you can hold on to? What's the thing you can look to? So that first thing, a reminder. Second thing is a sacred place. What is that sacred place? Like the 2 mule loads worth of earth. Naaman goes back and says, whenever I pray on this, I am praying in God's presence because I'm standing on the rock of the God who saved my life. I would say this, my sacred place is literally right there. Because virtually every day, that's where I get to park myself in front of Jesus. And this is that sacred place. You might have a chapel. That's a sacred place for you. You might have a church. You might have a chair. That's your sacred place. And that's the place where you're like, okay, this is one of those critical places where I live out that relationship with Jesus. So we have our reminders. We have our sacred places. We also have our sacred times. This is so important. Having the sacred time is that sense of saying, okay, I not only have a sacred place, but there's a time I get there. If I just kind of pray any old time, I won't pray at any time. I believe it's the catechism that said something along the lines of, it's impossible to pray always unless we pray at specific times. So for you, if you want to have your 2 mule loads worth of earth and not ever forget what God has done, but live out that encounter and a real relationship, not only where's your sacred place, but what is your sacred time? What's that time that says, if I can, that's the time I pray? So we have to use it. And we have to build our lives on it. But we also have to do one other thing. We have to say it. Well, we have to tell people the story. When I say it, I mean 2 things. One is, we have to thank God for it, right? So if God has done something in my life, I need to thank him. I think oftentimes I talk to people who say, well, I just don't know how to pray. I would say, well, it's really simple. Make God thank you a regular part of your prayer. What I mean by that is it's 3 parts, just very, very simply. First, notice what's good in your life. Secondly, track down the source of what's good. Like, where's that good come from? It could come from a friendship. It could come from a relationship, husband and wife. It could come from your kids. It could come from nature. It could come from the world around you. It could come from find what's good. Notice what's good. Track down the source. I'll tell you this, little spoiler. The ultimate source is God himself. And then say thank you. Look for what's good. Track down the source. It's God. And say thank you. And then lastly, tell people. I remember a couple years ago, I had met a bishop, a retired bishop, and the story about him and his life, he had retired and moved to like a little apartment building, and at one point he was hosting some friends over at his apartment. And he left the dining room and went to it was kind of a library room, a den area, study area. And he brought out a picture book about the miracle of Fatima. I don't know if you know anything about the miracle of Fatima, but in that picture book, there was a photo of his grandparents. His grandparents were actually in a black and white photo. I think they were 17 and 18 years old in this photo. They were actually so what Fatima is this 1917, the little Portuguese town of Fatima. Our Lady appears to these 3 children. And she appears a number of times, but a very critical moment happened on October 13th, 1917, where Mary announced that she would be, on October 13th, she'd be in this particular field. But people who came out there, they would see an unmistakable sign of God's presence. And so upwards, maybe even of 100,000 people showed up. And these were some believers, some skeptics, some doubters, some atheists, some newspaper reporters, people who just wanted to witness the event or witness it not happening. And they showed up in a torrential downpour. It was raining so hard that people talked about how their clothes, as they stood in this field, their clothes were soaked to the bone, and they found themselves standing in this field sinking up to their ankles in the mud. And then something happened. People describe it as if, they say the sun danced, that it began spinning, began casting colors around the crowd, zigzagging all over the earth as if the world were about to end. People are screaming, people are freaking out. But they all saw this thing until the sun went back to its spot. And the sign, the miracle, was over. And people noticed, they looked at their clothes. The clothes that had been previously soaked to the skin were completely dry. The earth that had been completely mud was now absolutely dry. And even those skeptics who showed up, those atheists who showed up, those newspaper people who showed up to debunk the whole thing said, no, this is real. And here's this bishop who's like, and here's a picture of my grandma and grandpa at 17 and 18 years old who were there. And I remember asking the question. I said, well, did they ever talk about it? Like, did your grandparents ever tell you the story? And this bishop said, my grandparents never stopped talking about it. He said, they always talked about it. And that's the difference. See, we're on this cycle because God's doing amazing things every day, and we need him every day. So we have we are in this place of great desperation. We cry out to God. He answers somehow, sometimes miraculously, sometimes in a way we could never imagine. And we're grateful because you're a good person. You have a good heart. You're grateful. But if we're going to actually not lose this great gift, we have to use it. That means we have to look at God and say, thank you. We have to tell people about what he's done. Can you imagine telling people about the great thing that Jesus has done for you? And above all, we have to find our 2 mule loads worth of earth. I say, this isn't just a thing that happened to me in one day. This isn't just a cool story in my life. But this was an encounter with Jesus Christ. And it changed my life. And now I am building my life on these 2 mule loads worth of earth of the God who saved my life.
You don't have to stay close. As long as you're somewhere out there, that's enough for me. I don't need to hold you near me, don't need promises to keep. Just the thought that you are breathing somewhere in this world I see. Even if I'm not beside you, even if you never know, there's a quiet kind of comfort just in knowing you still glow. I don't need forever, I just need you to exist. You don't have to stay with me, you don't have to feel the same. Just as long as you're still out there, calling softly through my days. You don't have to look my way, you don't have to be my home. It's enough to know you're living in a world I'm not alone. I won't chase you through the distance, won't disturb your chosen life. I'll just keep you in my silence, like a star that shines at night. Through the dark and through the blue, I still think of you. You don't have to stay with me, you don't have to feel the same. Just as long as you're still out there, calling softly through my days. You don't have to look my way, you don't have to be my home. It's enough to know you're living in a world I'm not alone. I don't need to be your light, I don't need to cross your mind. All I need is just the truth. that you're somewhere still alive. You don't have to stay with me, you don't have to feel the same, just as long as you're still out there, calling softly through my days. You don't have to look my way, you don't have to be my home. It's enough to know you're